Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. Before we get started, please share the show. I always ask you, spread the show. It's how we grow. Make sure you're subscribed. Give us a good rating and review. We appreciate it. Today's guest, I'm very excited about. He is here to talk to us about cells and how they communicate within our body and what that means for our health. Author of the book, The Secret Language of Cells, What Biological Conversations Tell Us About the Brain-Body Connection, the Future of Medicine, and Life itself. Author Jon Lieff is on the line with us. How are you doing today, Jon?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Delighted to be here.
I appreciate you coming on and taking the time to talk to us today, man. We like to talk about the future of medicine on this show. We like to talk about cellular communication. This is right up our alley. For first-time listeners, can you give a brief background on your professional credentials and then what led you to, go down this path and investigate and eventually author a book on cellular communication?
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm a neuropsychiatrist by profession. I have developed and run programs that include psychiatry, neurology, and medicine for a wide variety of complicated patients, some brain injury, the elderly, medically ill patients, and I've created hospital units over many years for that. And so I've been very interested in neuroscience and very interested in what the mind is and where the mind is in nature. So in order to investigate this further, I started a website, a blog about 10 years ago, where I evaluated scientific research every week. And what I did is I took very highly technical articles and made them easy to understand without using a lot of jargon. And it was called Searching for the Mind. And there are many, many articles on there, well over 200 in various subjects, including the human brain, animal brains, microbes. Knowing a lot about the human brain, I started investigating other brains as well. And it became apparent to me that you could not really define mind from the human brain, even though most people assume it comes from the human brain. There's no place in the brain that correlates with it. There's no single place that could pull together this subjective experience that we have. And of course, human brains cooperate in various ways. So the mind is in culture, it's in science, it's outside of the human brain. So I was wondering where this is. Now, when I investigated animal brains, I found that they were far more capable than most scientists had accepted. And even so then smaller and smaller brains, if you look at the insects, for example, they're spectacularly intelligent. Ants can learn 50 different new ways of how to find where they are. They relate to each other. They do farming. They help the hive. Bees speak a symbolic language. Right. Termites build an amazing thing. So I finally got down to cells, and I found that cells are also behaving in a very intelligent manner, and became very interested in what is the brain of a cell? How can the cell function as if it has a brain? And gradually over time, I realized that the communication among cells is the way everything works, the way biology works, not just in the brain, but every part of biology, including how we relate to microbes. So that's how the book evolved eventually from this study.
That is really wild. And all of that path of kind of studying the neurology and getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I don't want to go off on a whole tangent here, but I think just yesterday or the other day, maybe this is something that people like you are up on, but a popular newspaper released an article talking about an incredible discovery about birds being self-aware and conscious. And then, like you said, you talked to these smaller scales. It's like more of a lack of understanding than anything else. Sorry, go ahead.
I've written a lot about birds, and I wrote an article with Mark Beckhoff, who's one of the top animal researchers. And we wrote an article together of how birds and lizards and bees, their brains are tiny, and yet they're extremely intelligent.
Right.
I mean, birds are as intelligent, some birds, crows and certain birds, are as intelligent as primates.
Whoa.
And this new article you're referring to is the fact that a very young bird is equal to a grown primate in many ways. So birds are fantastically intelligent, and they have a tiny little brain. And what we've learned is that the size of the brain doesn't deal with the intelligence, but rather what is occurring, like what kind of signaling is going on, what kind of cell it is more important for the intelligence.
Wow, that is super fascinating stuff, because it's right. We've always said, the brain size compared to the mass of the body, the density of the brain, but there's much more going on. Of course, as always, there's much more going on. Can you give us a kind of 30,000-foot view? Talk to us about how cells communicate with each other, maybe some of the misconceptions that we might be holding?
Yes, so what happened is the more I studied it, the more I saw that most people are aware that neurons talk to each other because we all, the neurotransmitters, they're sending signals. But I don't think it's as we're aware that the same kind of signaling goes on everywhere in the cell. So, for example, the immune system is constantly in contact with the brain, such that you can't really separate them, and you can't really, the mind and the body really cannot be separated. They really are one brain. For just some examples, when we get sick, that sends a signal to the brain to make us feel sick. And when the infection is over, the T cell tells the brain, now you can feel well again. The sick feeling, makes us rest and sleep and take care of ourselves. And only the immune cell can tell it to stop having the sick feeling.
Wow.
What stress and anxiety have a lot to do with how we make new brain cells. They send signals. The immune cells send signals. New brain cells in adults are the memory cells, and memory goes down in depression. And again, this is the immune system telling the brain. But the communication goes back and forth. So the neurons also can control immunity, which was not known. That's new. So, for example, that explains why meditation can affect immunity, because when you affect the vagal nerve, that actually has effects on immunity. Acupuncture works. When you put a needle in, you expect to have some energy center there or some blood vessel or nerve, and there isn't. But what it turns out it's actually an immune cell, a T cell, is sitting there, and that T cell gets the needle, gets stimulated, and travels and then sends a signal to the nervous system, and then it goes all the way around the body.
Wow.
So these neuroimmune circuits are also critical for understanding pain. But it goes much further. It's not, we know the most about the immune brain, but for infections, for example, it's the capillary cell, the blood vessel cell, finds out that they need help in a certain area. They're sending signals to the bone marrow, which creates the proper immune cell. It travels through these signals where to go. Once they get to the area, they open a space to go through. This is all through signals. The platelets are involved. So the bottom line is that everything occurs through wide-ranging conversations, including gut lining cells. Microbes are involved. They're very involved in communicating about the immune system. They help determine the immune system, as a matter of fact, from signals in the gut. So the lesson from all this is that although it's more complicated, at least we know where to look for treatments now, because it wasn't, if you were studying the kidney, normally you would just study the kidney. But now with the new science of brain's of cellular conversations, you have to study a wide-ranging group of cells.
Wow.
Everything occurs with conversations between multiple types of cells.
That is really, really fascinating. And like you said, that's a real game changer for medicine. Just taking a look at the pandemic we're in, can you talk more about this cellular immunity? Someone was telling me that it's completely working on a different system than things like antibodies, and something that we're not really considering as heavily as we should. Do you agree with that? Would you correct that, push back against that? What are your thoughts?
Immunity is vastly complicated. And when you talk about the types of signals, you're talking about thousands of different signals and many different kinds of immune cells. The master cells are the T cells. And the master cell in the brain are the microglia. These are the cells that take charge and send signals and tell other cells what to do. So part of the picture is clearly antibodies. When a microbe invades us, the first responders are usually platelets. No one knew that platelets were intelligent also. They start signaling and attacking, and they have some neuropeptides. They have some other signals that fight against local viruses and bacteria, but they also call for the other immune cells when they come. Now, just to back up a little bit, we've known that microbes communicate with signals for 30 years. But it's only been recently that we've been able to study it in great detail because of the way science has advanced, and we can see more of the signals. So now we understand that because the microbes speak the same language as our cells, that's how they can be so influential with our cells. They interfere, they manipulate our conversations, they join the conversations sometimes for very positive things, and those are positive things about viruses we could talk about that actually protect us and that are in our cells. And for example, the placenta comes from a virus. It's a virus protein, and that's an old retrovirus that's in our cells, and we wouldn't have a placenta without a virus. Wow. And there are many other brain products that come from viruses. So we've known for 30 years about microbes, and only now are we seeing how the conversations between microbes and our gut cells and our skin cells and our immune cells have tremendous impact on everything, on diabetes, on obesity, on the brain, on emotions. But what was not known is that viruses also communicate, and that was only discovered 3 years ago. Whoa. I always thought so because of how elaborate they act. They have these very elaborate behaviors, and they evade all kinds of attacks, and they're able to manipulate the cell's language, and they manipulate little information sacs. But 3 years ago, we actually found a virus sending a signal to other viruses to make a decision about whether they should keep their bacteria alive to live off of, or whether they should kill it. And so they were talking about that. So this opened up the whole thing about about virology. They call it sociovirology, where viruses are talking. Now it's so new, but now 3 years later, within the last 3 years, 15 different complex discussions and signals have been found in viruses. So eventually, we will be able to communicate, join that communication as a way to eliminate viruses.
Oh, my God.
As a matter of fact, before antibiotics, there's a thing called phage viruses, which were viruses that only live with bacteria, and they were considered the way to get rid of bacteria. But since antibiotics came in, we forgot all about this. But when antibiotics sort of run dry, there's a huge world of using viruses to kill other bacteria as a way to help us. Right now, we're using it for cancer treatment. We take, because viruses have a natural communication with cancer cells, we're able to manipulate that and take a virus, and it'll go into the cancer and help kill the cancer. We also take advantage of the natural communication that occurs with cancer cells and a lot of other cells to make new treatments. But to come back to your question, I think what you're referring to is that recently it's found that T cells and B cells are more important in dealing with COVID than just the antibodies. And we're going to have to beef up the T cell responses. And T cells have a natural response to viruses. So they help with the antibodies, the T cells. The antibodies come from B cells, B lymphocytes, but the T cells are the masters, and they sort of help the B cells. But recently it was discovered that it's more complicated than just the B-cell antibodies.
Of course it is. Wow, man, this is really mind-blowing. This is quite a powerful interview here. I really can't thank you enough for sharing this. And of course, the book, again, for everyone out there listening, the book is The Secret Language of Cells. Okay.
Now, I just want you to know it's a very complicated subject, which I made simple in the book. In other words, the book is very comprehensive. It covers all kinds of different cells, but I eliminated jargon, so I don't use all kinds of words that have to be looked up. So anyone can read it. And what I found in the reviews is that people are saying that it's not trivial, but anyone can read it through without knowing the jargon of biology and genetics and microbiology.
So if our cells have all of these functions, all of these communications, there must be, and forgive me, speaking of lay people's terms, there must be an extraordinary amount of wisdom built into these cells, right?
Well, we're not allowed to say that if you're part of the scientists' union, but the truth is, you're right.
Let's call it programming. Hold on, for the scientists out there, we'll call it programming.
Well, it's just, so the brain our brain are just huge networks of interacting, cascading molecules that interact and affect each other and make changes. The cell is a brain in the same way, but the brain particles are molecules, and they create a network where one molecule interacts with another and changes it, and then that one is part of a cascade that changes others, and then there are multiple of these cascades, and they interact, and it's unbelievably complicated how the signaling actually works. I don't go into that in the book. I talk more about things that T cells talk with blood cells and talk with microbes and all those details. But the actual nuts and bolts inside the cell is remarkable, and it really is like a brain. So it's now, some people are talking about the brain in the cell.
That's wild.
And the intelligence of the cells. To me, they're remarkably intelligent. When you read it, you'll just... one woman who reviewed the book for the American Library Association, she says she's a professor who teaches all this, and it's rare that she says "wow." But she says there were many times when she said "wow" while reading it. I'll give you one little example. Okay, so we know about capillaries. They're just the blood vessel where the red cell comes and gives oxygen, and it's a simple thing. Turns out, capillaries are not so simple. They talk with the stem cells of the organ that they're living in. So the one in the liver talks to the liver, the one in the pancreas, the one in the lung. And it's the capillary cell that gives instructions to the stem cells about how to make the kind of cells that are needed for the liver. Now, who would have thought that was true? That's really kind of crazy. And yet that's how the stem cell in the liver knows to make this particular kind of cell versus that. It's being instructed by the blood vessel cell.
Wow.
Same with platelets. Platelets are supposed to be a plug. Well, but they're much more than that. They're a first responder. They're sending signals about calling for white cells. They send signals about, they actually attack specific viruses and microbes. No one would have thought that a platelet was intelligent. So we're finding that all cells are very, very intelligent. Some are more obviously intelligent, like the gut lining cell deals with trillions of microbes, makes friends with some of them, determines which are going to digest, which are making vitamins, and then has to defend, has to call the immune cells that they need, build the special immune, like food allergies. We would all have food allergies every day if this conversation didn't go on between the lining cell, the T cell, where the lining cell teaches the T cell not to attack these food particles because they're saying that that's normal. Wow. And yet they have to attack some of them. But so all of this is through communication between the friendly microbes, the immune cells, and the lining cells, directed by the lining cell in the gut. in this particular case. The same
That's
occurs on
so
the skin,
fascinating.
where the skin cell is determining the kinds of immune cells it needs wandering around just to maintain order based upon the environment that the skin happens to be in. So they're extremely intelligent.
I got to jump in here. That topic is so fascinating to me, and it speaks to something that I think that you're probably already pretty hip to. The increasing rise of allergies and these things like autoimmune diseases. A lot of doctors have come on this show and attribute that to a kind of assault on our microbiome. Do you subscribe to that or no?
Well, yes. We have a lot of negative aspects to our current environment. The food we eat is chemicalized. It's awful.
Lots of soda and alcohol, and the air we breathe ain't so great, and all of that's kind of affecting our microbiome.
All of this would affect the type of microbes we have. So, for example, if you're a vegetarian, you attract certain kinds of microbes, and they may have certain kind of beneficial effects. Whereas if red meat attracts a kind of microbe that eats carnitine, which is just part of the meat, and then it creates a substance that goes into the liver, is changed, and that creates atherosclerotic cardiac disease. So it isn't the meat. It's the microbe that the meat attracts that causes the problem. And
that's crazy.
So the more we study that, of course, we don't know enough for probiotics to cure everything, but I think eventually they're going to be absolutely vital in many treatments. But we don't know enough yet to say exactly which microbes do what.
That's all I hear. And all I hear is there's these trillions of microbes. How many do we have? How many do we have nailed down again? It's very fascinating. Very fascinating. Yeah,
there's trillions on the skin and there's trillions in the gut. Those are the two, and also in the lungs. People didn't. It's only recently that we realize the same kind of conversation goes on with the lung cell, and they attract friendly microbes who then help fight against the negative microbes.
So fascinating.
Yes, this is the new. I don't know if you know Andy Weil. He said about the book that it's a new paradigm for health and disease. In other words, you have to look at the conversation. You have to find the wide-ranging conversation in order to figure out what the treatments really are going to be.
Wow.
It's not just you go after this one cell. You have to intercept the conversation with 5, 6 different cells.
This has been a fantastic interview. I know we're up against it here. I appreciate you giving us this time today. Just really quick, what can listeners expect when they pick up your book? Just an overall pitch for the book. It looks fantastic, everybody. The Secret Language of Cells. Why should people run out and grab this book, Jon?
Well, there are a lot of reasons. I mean, it will tell you how physiology really works, not what you've been taught. It will tell how medicine really works. If you want to understand advanced medicine treatments, why they work, like why do these cancer treatments work, it explains that. It explains how microbes can be so influential. It's divided into 4 parts. The first is about the body cells, examples, skin and gut and the immune system and the white blood cells. Then the second part is about brain cells. Each chapter is about a different cell, really. And then there's a section on microbes that explains how they interact with everything. And then the last part goes inside the cell, how the same kind of signaling is working internally to the cell. In other words, if you really want to understand how it works, this is how it works. Also, I think the definition of life has to be defined, because life is not just a cell that reproduces. Life is an intelligent cell that talks to other cells as well. Wow. So that part has not been primary definition of life, but I think it has to be.
Wow. Really, really incredible. Real quick question to wrap it up here. We talk a ton about coffee on this show. As a neuroscientist, you have to
coffee,
I was just going to say, you have to be familiar with, are you up to the research on some of the brain benefits of coffee? Are you one of the doctors that subscribes to them? Do you say moderate your coffee? What is your opinion on coffee and the health benefits?
Well, everyone has a different set of physiology and illnesses and needs. So I don't give general advice from a medical point of view, but coffee appears, if it's in a moderate amount, is not only safe but very beneficial in a lot of ways. So
more doctors have been saying that. I'm happily surprised to hear you say that.
Well, I keep up on the research since I drink coffee each day, and I'm delighted that it's helpful for the brain. It's helpful for antioxidants. It's helpful to avoid infections. I mean,
you get it.
But again, all this it's hard to prove things in the population studies. So it's very hard to prove.
We need that control.
The important thing is that people not, have it affect their sleep negatively, not take too much. Not use it, just to stay up all night and study, because the studies have shown that your brain doesn't work well when you stay up all night studying. You have to take naps, actually, in order to consolidate learning. So you need to sleep in order to consolidate learning. So if used wisely, I think it's wonderful.
I love it. Yeah, and you're right, because we're never going to prove this, because you need a control where you follow someone around and give them fake coffee, but they don't know the difference, and you study them for their whole life. It's just never going to happen. So
it's
still
so complicated. But from what we do know, it certainly doesn't appear to have much danger, and it does appear to have many potential benefits.
Thank you so much, Jon Lieff, for taking the time today. One more time, everybody, the book, The Secret Language of Cells, What Biological Conversations Tell Us About the Brain-Body Connection, the Future of Medicine, and Life Itself. Go and get it, everybody. Jon, we'll let you go, and I'll do a little outro here. One more time, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. This is a fantastic interview.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right, we'll see you next time, Jon. Take care, buddy.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Wow, that was fantastic. I didn't think it was going to be that strong. That was really, really great. Thank you to Jon Lieff, MD. Thank you to you subscribers and listeners. Stay subbed. We got great stuff coming right at you on the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. Pleasure to bring you this lovely, unique content. We'll see you next time, everybody. Have a great day. Stay safe out there. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.